Good morning. I'm Saini at the University of Canberra, and I am discussing This Week in Politics with Michelle Grattan. Good morning, Michelle.
Hi, Deep.
Following this latest report of potential energy shortage in Australia in the future, the government has been quite concerned about future-proofing Australia's energy supplies, and its particular focus has been on ensuring the continuation of a coal-fired plant in Hunter region. Can you give us a summary of that situation? What's going on there?
The government became quite panicky after it started to see the implications of the closure of the Hazelwood power station in Victoria. So it commissioned a special report on the future, essentially, of baseload power. And this report, as you say, showed that we do face shortages in the next few years. And one way was not to build new baseload capacity, because that takes a long time, but to make use of existing capacity for longer. And that brought us to the Liddell power station in the Hunter. AGL has a plan to phase that out, to close it in 2022. The government wants to keep it open for another 5 years, either for AGL to do that or for the plant to be sold. So that's where we're up to at the moment, something of a standoff between the government and the company.
But it's in this standoff, the government has been doing some quite public arm twisting of, essentially the private sector, which is bullying. Yeah, that's right. And that's pretty unusual. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's certainly unusual for a coalition government, and I think that business generally is looking rather askance at that sort of tactic, because after all, if a company decides for its own purposes to close down a power station, then it has every right to. What the Prime Minister is saying is that it's in the national interest to keep it going and that the company is just looking to its profits. But those running a company have obligations primarily to their shareholders. So it is an unusual situation, and I think we should see it also in the wider context of the government being very interventionist in this power issue. For example, it's moved to be very active in the gas market to ensure that enough gas is reserved for domestic supply, that exports don't take such precedence that there's not enough for home. And the Prime Minister has called in the heads of energy companies, retailers, and told them to contact their customers to tell them that they can be on better deals when that applies. So we're seeing overall a government which is determined to try to be seen to be doing everything it can to contain power prices, and that does lead to this highly interventionist approach.
This is happening against the backdrop of Chief Scientist Alan Finkel's report, the last recommendation of which is about clean energy. And the government still hasn't made any decision on that. That seems to smell of division within the coalition. To what extent do you think that is the cause of that delay?
Well, a very strong smell of division, very open division, and this is between those who believe that coal must have a major role in our energy production into the future, and those who are saying, well, we are transitioning in the long term to renewable energy and playing down the role of coal. What we've seen since the Finkel report was presented to the government in June is first the government, or at least Malcolm Turnbull and Minister Josh Frydenberg, being very attracted to the clean energy target model that Finkel put forward. But in the weeks since then, we've seen coal really moving further and further to the centre of the stage in this debate. It was always going to be part of the clean energy target because people within the government who are strong supporters of coal would always make that so. But it has really come much more to the heart of things, and now we find Malcolm Turnbull extolling the virtues of coal because of this issue of baseload power versus intermittent power, which is the renewables feature. And therefore, I think at the moment, we really can't tell where this clean energy target is going to land, assuming it lands at all. And if and when it does, I don't think it'll be called a clean energy target. I think we'll have something that has energy security or whatever in it.
Switching to another subject that's been in the play quite a lot, and that is the so-called 2 out of 3 media rule and the elimination of that essentially. And the government got that through the parliament. First, tell us, explain to us what is this 2 out of 3 media rule?
The 2 out of 3 media rule is that an owner can't have television, radio and print in a single market. They can only have 2 of those. So it does put restrictions, obviously, on the possibility of owners merging and acquisitions, takeovers, etc. Now, with the media market really becoming a quite difficult one in recent years for a variety of reasons, big companies want more flexibility to merge and to take over other enterprises. And so the owners have been pressing for deregulation. Now this has been got through the Senate, and therefore that's a big win for the government.
To get this big win, because this has been a contentious issue, the government clearly had to make compromises.
It did make some compromises. Well, it really threw out some concessions, I guess. Yeah. It spent some $60 million to make Senator Xenophon happy, and that money will help small publishers, regional publishers, provide some cadetships, things like that. It made some promises to Pauline Hanson on the ABC. These amount to really potentially clipping the wings of the ABC somewhat in the future, but at least some of these measures, which will be in separate legislation, will, I think, be defeated when they come to the Senate later in the year. So precisely how much she's got is not clear. But if you look at all these concessions in total, the government really has got away fairly lightly. It hasn't had to give much, and it's got through a measure that it's been pressing for quite a long time.
To another subject, the ballots on marriage legislation have started arriving.
Yes, mine came this week.
That's good. Now, at the same time, there is this risk of vilification during the public debate that's already underway, actually. And government has moved very quickly to curtail the possibility of people being vilified over this issue, or organizations being vilified. Now, government got that legislation through, but how necessary was it, and to what extent it would curtail freedom of speech?
There was an agreement with the Labor Party and some negotiations about the content of that legislation. Look, I think it is desirable that we have that legislation. It only lasts for the duration of the ballot, but this is a very particular ballot. It's a very special issue, and obviously there are high feelings on both sides. So I think those protections are desirable. I don't think that they will form a real restraint on freedom of speech, because the penalties, which are civil penalties, action can only be taken to try and get penalties if the Attorney General agrees to that. So there is a filter there. Of course, some people object to that filter, but nevertheless, I think it's a reasonable balance in the circumstances.
Good to know that, yeah. Well, thank you, Michelle. You have a nice day, and stay warm in this, what I hope would be the last cold day of this winter.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see you.